Hello and welcome to Inside Neyland Stadium. I'm Ryan Sylvia. This is Noah Taylor, and we are with VolReport.com and the Rivals Network. And Tennessee just took care of business against Chattanooga. Wasn't much of a contest. Tennessee kind of jumped on them early. Final score is going to be 69-3 in favor of the Vols. Quick stat breakdown team-wise. Total yards 717 for Tennessee on 90 ran plays, just 227 for Chattanooga on 59 ran plays, and pretty good portion of that was in the second half for Chattanooga as well. Under 100 yards in the first half for Chattanooga. The rush pass split on the ground, 300 yards on the dot for Tennessee on 46 rushes, 74 yards for Chattanooga, and through the air, 417 on the day. Most of them from Nico in that first half. We'll get to him soon. For Tennessee, 417 yards and then 153 for Chattanooga. Let's talk about Nico though. His stat line, record-breaking, the most in any half in Tennessee football history from a quarterback in passing yards with 313, 22 for 28 throwing the ball, 3 touchdowns, 2 of them to Dante Thornton, 1 of them to the tight end, Ethan Davis, along of 59 and takes 1 sack. What are your thoughts on his performance?
Yeah, all we've heard since the bowl game practices from Josh Heupel was Nico's command of the offense, and I mean he showed it today. He spread the ball around. You see some of the guys he was able to hit. Obviously Dante leads that group, but Brew in his first game back from injury got some targets as well. Took advantage of those. Obviously you mentioned Ethan Davis there. I think too the way how quickly Tennessee was able to score under when Nico was in the game. I know it's Chattanooga. I know it's game 1, but I think that was one of the biggest drop-offs from last year offensively with Joe Milton was you weren't doing those quick hits like Tennessee was able to do. Longest drive of the game I think was in the fourth quarter when Jake Merklinger was in there and they went 7 minutes. So you see a lot of very quick drives and reminiscent of what Tennessee was able to do a few years ago. Again, like I said, Chattanooga obviously you got to look at the opponent. But a very good start for Nico Iamaleava is now Tennessee's unquestioned leader of this offense.
I don't think you can really complain. There's a couple throws, maybe he runs back, but at the end of the day, you complete 22 of 28 passes, which honestly I didn't expect him to go out and throw that much, but clearly they wanted to kind of see what Nico had in this type of game setting against a different opponent and not in that bowl game setting, and he came through. I mean, you set a record. I mean, what more could you really ask for? Nico wanted a little bit more out of himself. Josh Heupel wanted a little bit more out of him. Of course, that's kind of, athletics. Like that's competition is you're never satisfied. He talked about, Josh Heupel didn't give any specifics, but Nico talked about maybe that 2-minute drill that we were doing at the end of that first half. Things stalled out. Tennessee ends up with nothing on the board after it. Maybe that could be something that's sharpened up. It'll be something that needs to be sharpened up when you get into SEC play or when you get into next week against NC State, who, yeah, sure, they struggled against Western Carolina, but that's still a solid team and a team that Tennessee's going to have to go out and play good football against. Maybe you do need points in a 2-minute situation. Well, then that's something that's got to get sharpened up. Let's talk about the receivers, though. I think the 2 headliners, Dante Thornton and Drew McCoy. Dante Thornton catches 2 of the touchdowns. He finishes with just 3 receptions, 105 yards. He had that long of 59 from Nico. And then Drew McCoy catches 6 balls. He's got 88 yards. Took a rush for 9 yards as well. So Brew McCoy off of injury has a nice game. And also Dante Thornton off of injury. What were your thoughts on just the receiving game as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, 2 guys that you expected big things, especially Brew, obviously, this year coming in. A guy that's obviously, done some really good things for Tennessee. You go back to that 2022 season, and you kind of expected him to take a huge leap once Cedric Tillman and Jalen Hyatt were gone. Obviously, that injury derailed it. You were kind of curious about what would he look like coming back from injury. Would he be a little bit hesitant to, make contact and things like that? You didn't see that at all today. It really some strong play from him after the catch, I thought, along the sideline. Was very consistent when the ball was thrown his way, which is what you expect. He was that way, when he did get targeted in 2022 and he was fully healthy. But then Dante Thornton, Josh Heupel talked about it in there, and we talked about it in fall camp, obviously, with him. But, a guy that didn't really fit in well, to start his career here as a transfer from Oregon. Heupel talked about, putting him on the inside and at a kind of necessity last year. But then you saw going in late in the season, he was finding kind of his rhythm there on the outside. And, you're kind of curious about what that would look like now that he's back to full strength. And, man, that's a really good start for him if you're expecting to a lot out of him this year. I mean, you couldn't ask for a better way to come back after injury.
Yeah, Brew McCoy was interesting because like the first couple times he catches maybe a screen or a pass over the middle, and he was hold your breath. You're like, all right, is everything okay? But then by like the fourth or fifth time, it was like, okay, I guess this is Brew McCoy's good. He's good to go. And of course, that's what the coaches have been telling us, and that's what other players and Brew McCoy's been telling us. But it is different to see it inside Neyland Stadium in an actual game to like be like, okay, like he is fine. Because that was a tough injury. Like that's not an injury that everyone can come back from at 100%. Well, Brew McCoy, honestly, it's Chattanooga, but looks better than ever in one game. So we'll see how that progresses throughout the season. We keep saying it's Chattanooga, so you don't want to put too much stock into it, but I thought that was a really strong showing from Brew McCoy and just the whole wide receiver room, even when those guys started to come off the field and maybe you got a little deeper into that rotation, things still looked really strong as well with the tight ends. Kitzelman, the first guy on the field, Ethan Davis catching catches that touchdown, and then Holden Stays gets in there as well, so that trio of tight ends got some work in too. Last thing on offense, I want to touch on, we'll stick with kind of the skill position guys today. The offensive line, I think, did their job for the most part. Lance Hurd gives up a sack, maybe a sort of miscommunication or something. It seemed like a weird play there, but kind of free runner gets Nico. That's the only time Nico sacked. Outside of that, I thought the offensive line, especially that front or that first unit, did a good job. Maybe some things down the list that you want to clean up, but that first five, including Andre Carrick, who gets to start at left guard, I thought did a fine job considering the opponent. Dylan Sampson, another great opener for him. Think back to Virginia a year ago when he scores 4 touchdowns, 3 on the ground, 1 through the air. It doesn't reach that point, but also didn't play as much, just played in the first half, and he gets 3 touchdowns on the ground. He rushes for 124 yards in 12 carries, 3 touchdowns, like I said, along a 56, where he kind of scampered down that sideline, got pushed out just before the goal line, and then punched it in the next play for that 2-play, I think 59-yard drive all from Dylan Sampson. And he averages, my favorite stat from his stat line, 10.3 yards per carry. So every time he touched the ball is a first down on average in this game for Dylan Sampson. What were your thoughts, not only on Dylan Sampson, but also just that running back room as a whole?
You know, it was funny because I know we talked a lot about it this week and last week too, when Josh Heupel you talked about Cam Seldon, being cleared for contact, and we knew that Dylan Sampson had been limited in fall camp. Of course, we got a little more insight into that today after talking to him and Heupel about just how limited he was in fall camp. And the question I think coming into it was, well, what would that running back room look like? Dylan Sampson and Cam Seldon are healthy, but how much do they really want to run them? How much did Deshaun Bishop, a guy that the coaching staff has talked a lot about, how would he handle getting more reps? I thought you got a really good balance of both, because Dylan Sampson, obviously, you mentioned the opener, had another fantastic opener today, and obviously carried the load, looked exactly like what you'd expect him to look as now the clear-cut leader in that running backs room. Cam Seldon had some really nice runs. I thought there was one scoring drive there where I think he had close to 20 yards on 2 runs, and then Deshaun Bishop making the most of his carries. Almost had that touchdown where he stumbled a little bit up the middle, but and then obviously punching it, finally getting that first career touchdown. So we were curious about what that room would look like today, how limited those guys would be. I think you got to see the most out of Cam Seldon that you could, and Dylan Sampson. You got to see a lot of Deshaun Bishop too.
I do think that was maybe less of a rotation than I imagined, especially for Chattanooga, though. It felt like Dylan Sampson was in the game for a lot in that first quarter, and maybe that's a sign of what this running back rotation is going to look like. They have 5 guys they say they feel good about, but at the beginning of this game, it looked like a lot of Dylan Sampson, and then maybe whenever he needed a blow, then you get Cameron Seldon to come in, and then after that, maybe a little bit of Deshaun Bishop here and there, maybe try to ride that hot hand if he gets going, like how Dylan Sampson was kind of used at the beginning of last year, where it's like, all right, this is the younger guy, but if he gets hot, we're going to ride him by the end of the year. He was one of your kind of feature backs. But maybe that's what this is going to be this year, is Dylan Sampson kind of gets a lot of carries, and we see how kind of much his body can sustain that throughout the season. Or maybe I'm reading too much into it, because once again it's Chattanooga and that rotation kind of looks more like it has in the past, especially last year when you had that 3-headed monster that you were just kind of rotating through. But all in all, I agree, a nice running game from Tennessee. Even when you knew that they were running the ball, and Chattanooga knew they were running the ball, and you had your reserve linemen, your reserve running backs, I felt like they still moved the ball pretty well. So that's a positive sign going forward. Talk about that defense, though. Who stood out on defense to you today?
Tyree West. I mean, he kind of it was the story of the day. Another guy that you look back into that Citrus Bowl game back in January that played really well, took advantage of kind of his more playing time, more reps in that game, and it's bled over. Had a really good game today, gets the 2 sacks there. I think forced a fumble on the 1 turnover that Chattanooga had offensively. Just a really good day from him. And a Tennessee defensive line that obviously you're expecting a lot of, but Rodney Garner, Tim Banks, they touted that depth a lot in the offseason, that it's more than just, obviously James Pierce on the other end. Now you've got, you're bookended by 2 guys that showed today can play really, really well and be a benefit for you. He definitely stood out.
Here's a question. Maybe I'm putting things together that aren't there, but James Pierce Jr. comes off an Orange Bowl where he had a really nice performance.
Yeah.
He's not the starter the next season, but he continues to kind of impress as that young season in 23 goes on, and by the end of the year, he's the James Pierce Jr. we know now. Could that be Tyree West? He has a really nice Citrus Bowl. He impresses against Chattanooga. Maybe he has a nice game in NC State. And by the end of the year, he's that starter. Not that Dominic Bailey. I thought Dominic Bailey had a really nice game as a starter as well. But by the end of the year, maybe Tyree West has taken that next level step like James Pierce has. Am I reading into the similarities too much?
I mean, I think it goes back to, and we talked about it last week. I think it goes back to that Tim Banks quote where he said, because of that, you've seen guys that took advantage of reps late in the year and then take a huge step the next year. Mm-hmm. Obviously, James Pierce was that guy like you just mentioned. I mean, it could be. It's definitely kind of would fall in line with what Tennessee's been able to do at that position. And I mean, I think today's as good of a start as you could ask for. And Joshua Josephs, too, I think ended up with half a tackle for loss.
Caleb Herring had a nice game from his limited action.
We knew coming in how good that defensive line was going to be, and we heard how good that depth was going to be. This was a game where you really kind of wanted to showcase that, and I think they did.
Yeah, secondary-wise, I think they did a pretty decent job as well. And linebackers, too. I mean, I don't think that the linebackers had an insane amount on their plate, but I thought they handled their job. And then the secondary, same situation where you were interested on how that young secondary would react. Ricky Gibson doesn't play today. We will find out more on that soon, I'm sure. But you go to Jalen McMurray. Thought he did a good job at corner. I thought Jermod McCoy did a good job at corner. The safeties from Turrentine to Will Brooks, I thought they did nice. But the star position, of course, is what a lot of people are looking at, considering that Jordan Thomas wasn't able to go this season after his leg injury. So you start Christian Harrison, Boo Carter gets a bunch of reps. I think it's still going to be a tough situation for them to kind of pick one, and maybe they don't have to pick one. Maybe you can continue to rotate them in, but I thought both guys played really well. Boo Carter got to the quarterback. They're blitzing that star position a lot, and then also as that nickel back in coverage, I thought both of them did a fine job as well. We'll wrap things up quickly. Special teams, you can take your pick. You want to talk Max Gilbert or the one Jackson Ross punt?
I guess I'll go Gilbert because there was, we were kind of wondering what that kicking situation would look like. It sounded like he had kind of created some separation there late in fall camp, and then comes out today. And obviously they weren't high pressure kicks by any means, but
at the same time, they kind of, when there's 2 guys right behind you wanting your job, of course you're not kicking the game-winning field goal against Alabama.
For sure, yeah.
But that kick needs to go through the
absolutely,
uprights.
Yeah, and to do it twice. I know the one was 42. I can't remember what the first one was.
I think it was in the 30s.
So 2 decently long kicks, to kind of showcase what you have. And like you said, if it is as close as maybe the coaches were saying it was, then it was really important for him to show that he could be reliable in that situation.
I mean, if you come out here and you do what Chattanooga's kicker did and you miss a couple kicks, you're probably not the kicker against NC State.
Yeah.
That's just kind of the way that kicking position works. So, like I said, you're not Chase McGrath kicking the field goal to beat Alabama. It's not that type of pressure, but there is a sort of pressure that goes into that. Jackson Ross punting the ball, 1 punt, didn't go, I'm sure, as he planned. I'm not worried about it.
Yeah.
He had a bad start last year. Not that I really didn't even consider this like a bad start because you get 1 rep.
Yeah.
And it's that's a tough situation to get tossed into. But overall, 1 punt didn't go very well. But I don't think that's anything to read into too much. We'll probably find out more against NC State. Interesting matchup. Western Carolina gave them a run for their money there over in Raleigh. So we'll have to see how this Tennessee team goes into that matchup in Charlotte and responds to maybe a team that maybe they're not as good as we thought they were, or maybe they take a step in the right direction. They come out really strong against Tennessee. We will find out a week from today. We will be there in Charlotte at that neutral site to see it go down. So for coverage leading up to game day, for coverage on game day, for basketball, baseball, softball, everything you need Tennessee athletics, we have you covered over at VolReport.com. Links to everything you need is in the description. Thank you for watching.